Welcome to the Working CEO podcast, where we share real advice for busy business leaders. No business school BS, no sugarcoating, just straight talk about how to get work done. Want to know how to get things done? Well, get out of your own way. That's a good tip from today's guest, Kim Curtis, President and CEO of Wealth Legacy Institute. Beyond helping her clients leave a financial legacy, she believes in leaving the legacy of leadership. Her advice? Step back and let your team shine. We will chat with Kim about her groundbreaking financial planning model, her views and leadership, and perhaps her favorite guilty pleasure. That's up next on the Working CEO podcast. Stay tuned. Hi, everyone. I'm your co-host, Susanna Song, and I'm here with the Working CEO himself, Mark Porter, CEO of Highwire Networks. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Susanna.
Well, we've got Kim with us, and I'm dying to know what this guilty pleasure is as we segue into this episode. How are you, Kim?
Hello, thank you. Nothing like sidewinding me there. Boom. Yeah. Oh, my guilty pleasure. Yeah, we'll table that for now. There are many.
Oh, come on. We're dying to know now.
Yeah, just not feel guilty, and then you wouldn't have to worry about it. That's it.
I love that. That's fair. I love that. That's great, Mark. You know, when I go visit my mom, I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and I would visit her, and she would always have these magazines, and they were like People Magazine or the Esquire or whatever, and I would just fall into them, and an hour later realize that I lost that amount of time. And so I end up, it's like crazy, and it happens when I go to the grocery store. I get in line and I do this, and it's the only time I actually see those magazines, but for whatever reason, they're very good at marketing to suck me in.
I feel guilty about that. At least it's not the National Enquirer.
I hear you there.
We've got the internet for that now. I don't know, is the National Enquirer still a thing, or?
I don't even know.
I'm not allowed to go grocery shopping.
I just look at Apple News. Like, that's what's
or Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter is like a rabbit hole you can spend days in these days. I love it, but it's addictive. I actually had to find myself moving to get away from my phone. So I'm actually very excited. I told somebody that I'm going on a hunting trip in January, and I'm pretty sure there's no cell service for like 4 days. So that's like the most exciting thing in the world to me. After the initial anxiety of withdrawal, I'm actually very much looking forward to it, because I usually only get that if I get out on the water in Florida. So tell us about yourself a little bit. You've got quite an interesting background, and why don't you let people know a little bit about what you do, and then we'll kind of get into, really what we talk about a lot here is kind of why, and then we've got a couple other questions that we kind of freeform from here. So give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, happy to, Mark. So as I grew up in Buffalo thinking that everyone had weather like that. Little did I realize when I moved to Denver, Colorado to go to law school, how different the weather was. So I have a legal background, and my area of expertise is negotiation, mediation, arbitration, and was with a national dispute resolution firm headquartered out in New York City and reported to the president. And as I moved up in the ranks, I no longer was doing settlement conferences or negotiations, so I became a spokesperson. So at 30, I ended up in finance by taking a quiz. Believe it or not, yeah. I had who doesn't have a friend in human resources, right, that has all of those assessments that we can do to figure out what's our next, and mine was finance and financial planning. And I thought, shoot, at 30, I already, hit the reporting to the president. I thought this would be such a piece of cake. And I thought 3 to 5 years, no problem. But it was like, okay, 5 to 7. And realistically, as an entrepreneur and someone in finance, the sweet spot is really around 7 to 10 years before you feel like you're on top of your game and you're making a difference in people's lives and you're actually being able to afford living. So that was my journey, and this is where I am today. And that was over 30 years ago that I made that transition.
What is it? Was there something in particular that kind of made you make this leap to say, I'm going to go conquer the world on my own?
Yes. When I was with this national dispute resolution firm, they sent me to Salt Lake City to open up an office. And so that's where I got kind of the entrepreneurial bug and recognized that I wanted, as I did that I wanted to next thing that I create be my own. And that's when I made the switch. That's a great question.
From there to making that jump, how long was that?
From being entrepreneurial to entrepreneurial?
Yep.
7 years.
7 years.
There it is again.
There it is. Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, it was 7 years.
And what ultimately, was there, when you decide, you got the bug, and that's a long time for something to be ruminating around inside. How did you ultimately decide, like, today's the day that I make that step? Was it a long drawn out plan, or was it, like
No.
a lot of us, where there's this one moment and it's like, today is the day?
Today is the day. I appreciate that question, because when I went into finance, I was with a national brokerage firm. And that was also around a 7-year time frame, where I realized, as a matter of fact, Mark, I actually read the back of a client disclosure statement. And at the time it was 8 pages, 2 to a page. So it was tiny, tiny print of disclosures, conflicts of interest, and all of these things that made me realize that I was not a fiduciary, putting my client's interests first. I was in sales. And that was the immediate disruption of, okay, how do I make a difference that put clients first? And that's when I created Wealth Legacy Institute. And that was 15 years ago. Okay. That was creating a firm that kind of had humanity at its center and clients first, not last, which is not the case in a brokerage world. When you are in a brokerage world, you work for the house, even though you want to do your best work. And you try to do your best work, but the way it's structured is different. It's kind of like going to the grocery store, and what's on eye level shelf, the groceries, they pay more to have access to that eye level. And that's similar in the financial world.
Yep, they sell you the air in there. You just don't know it. Not it's true. Not in the sense of breathing, but we've done some pretty substantial projects over the years. In fact, doing one right now, and what they actually sell you the airwaves in there. They sell the rights to those airwaves, and they're putting information. If you connect to that wireless network and you have their app, not only are you being tracked, you're being pushed. They're pushing information at you. That's the last great frontier. Although I thought that was, and then they found ways to monetize the glass shelves, the glass doors on the, all in the name of saving energy, they said. So probably does that too, but the advertising on there is pretty awesome. So nightmare to fix, but pretty interesting stuff. So it's interesting you talk about the investment community and the concept of the fiduciary, because that is it's an interesting. I got some advice from our New York counsel. We were talking about something about a year and a half ago, and he said, just remember, anytime you're talking to the investment bankers, you have to understand what their self-interest is. He said, and then they become very predictable, because they will always do what's in their own self-interest. So it's, I would say, oftentimes a very common thing when you're investing your own money and talking to folks who are trying to sell you an investment, right? They have different structures on what makes them money too. And it is kind of a gnarly mess with some of the folks that I've dealt with in the past.
It's an industry trying to become a profession, at least in the financial planning, wealth management space. Because if you think of money, you had your protection planning insurance agents, you had your brokers, you had your tax preparers, your CPAs, and then you had your lawyers for estate planning. So the certified financial planner is really the one that understands how all of the areas interconnect, and there's not one decision you make in one area that doesn't affect another. But yet bringing all those together and each one wanting to be a professional, even though the CPAs and the lawyers already had that designation. So it's kind of just really struggling to find its way. And I hope it does, because money is the thread that navigates all of our human existence, every aspect of our lives. And to be able to get objective advice is so critical, particularly as our young children kind of enter the world, because they never really touch money today. It's all digital. So we better figure it out.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I think as I think about how I know certainly in my journey as an entrepreneur, and I'm thinking about all the conversations, hundreds of conversations with other folks that have had, that moment where they decided to throw it all, roll the dice and throw caution in the wind and all that good stuff. The one thing that I can think of when I talk to a lot of them, we don't talk about this on the podcast or have not before. They're very candid about talking about mistakes in business. But I know when I talk to them over drinks, and I know when we get real and get down to the nitty gritty, the one mistake that all of us have made over time is not paying enough attention to our personal finances and our personal wealth, because we're so wrapped up in the business and not realizing how over leveraged we are typically in our business, especially as they're small or whatever. Even as they get in the mid-size, I mean, you're often so heavily leveraged on that as the outcome. And one need look no further back to 2020 than to realize how quickly and catastrophically things can fall apart in the blink of an eye. And you can't control it at all. Right? I thought most variables I thought I had some control over. 2020 taught me how little we have control over, as we never saw that coming. But it's an interesting thing. So do you work with a lot of entrepreneurs who are, I would guess you probably work. There's a lot of people that come after you when you're later in your career, in your 50s and late 40s and 50s, and have amassed some wealth. You're a great target to talk to. But how about early stage entrepreneurs and helping plan for that 40, 50 year time frame where you don't have a traditional retirement, like people who sit in a job and work build an IRA or 401k. Do you work with people early in that journey?
We really don't, because when you think of a firm like ours that is wealth management, there actually is usually a transition event, or to be a transition event. So someone in their 30s or 40s to try to create success around their business is looking for money and resources. And in the nature of those 6 key areas of financial planning, that oftentimes is your protection guy in terms of insurances that are making sure that you have some of these basic things in place as you build out that business and as employees to that business as well. So they're usually the first guys in that conversation besides the banker.
What advice would you give somebody who's making all the classic mistakes? I'll tell you what, number one I'd give is, and I talked about this with a man who's amassed a lot of wealth the other day. He said, pay yourself, which is very hard to do. I mean, there's a lot of people think that most entrepreneurs are making money hand over fist. They're often grossly underpaying themselves. But in terms of planning or building for the longer term, which is not often a great attribute of somebody who's building a business, they're trying to figure things out day to day. What advice would you give somebody who's thinking about this and not going to have a regular paycheck for a while, and once they start doing that, what do you do?
Well, and you guys can probably relate to this as well, in terms of it always starts with that spending plan and how many of us ignore ourselves to make sure we pay the employees in the beginning. I think the number one thing that we have seen as I have grown as relates to the type of clients that we work with is taxes. is you're making money and you're barely paying your bills and you're trying to take care of things, and then all of a sudden you forget to set aside your estimated quarterlies. And then April comes along and you have this big ass tax bill. And I tell you, I can't, the most honest of business owners, that bites them quite easily. And I think that is the first thing that I would have a conversation about, is to set when you get paid, that's not your money, that it should go into this account. Ideally, that account should be a corporate entity. And with that, have money set aside for the
taxes. Let's talk about that
taxes.
for a minute, because that's one thing. I got good advice early on, so it's not a challenge that I've ever had. I've always budgeted appropriately and tried to counsel others. I was laughing because I'm just thinking about a partner I had that we handed a $400,000 check to, and I said, listen, be very straight with your wife that this is only going to be in your bank account for like 2 weeks, and don't play games and get her all excited. That I said, we're taking care of a problem that I thought would have taken 2 years to fix. And we had great success right out of the box. He went home and told his wife that they were keeping all of it, and she was super excited. And then he had to tell her that they were only keeping a small piece, not even half. It was like 75 grand of it. So, which is, by the way, not horrible. Like that's a great,
still, yeah.
That was a year's worth of gross pay for him in the year before. So it was a big deal. I mean, it was really a big deal. Misplayed the messaging around it. So to other young male entrepreneurs, don't mess with your wife like that, because it didn't end well. But I want to talk about the prepaid taxes, because again, for somebody who's thinking about starting out, or somebody who is starting out, I know people who do really horrible things, like are more than happy to just pay the 2% penalty to avoid it. That is
yeah.
There's just that's just mismanagement of your own finances that you don't need to do. But a lot of people don't realize that in year one, you often can declare safe harbor and be okay. But once you have a baseline to draw from, if you're not getting accounting advice that tells you to prepay your taxes and estimate your quarterlies and all that stuff and pay it as you go, first of all, you are setting yourself up for one hell of an April, May timeframe, or in my case, October or November or whatever it is when we finally get into getting it all done. But prepaid taxes is like the bane of the young entrepreneur. You are going to be paying, as an owner, one of the great privileges in life that you get is to pay your taxes in advance on money that you may never actually get to keep. So if the business goes south, you may never see those dollars, but you will have basis after that. So, prepay your taxes, understand quarterly estimated taxes, talk to your tax professional, and do everything you can to minimize it. And as I always like to say, there is a difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion. It's 10 years. So,
well, the other piece around that is that when I've interviewed other, especially people in sales like realtors or others, is the ones that are really, really successful are the ones that their first person on their team was their CPA and their tax preparer. So as an entrepreneur, that is like your integral person that you want near you to make sure, besides what we just talked about, but other opportunities as structuring kind of a retirement plan for yourself or your family. And then as your business grows, how does that plan change?
And there's a big difference between somebody who helps you with your taxes or prepares your taxes and a CPA who is helping you plan to minimize your tax liabilities, maximize what you get to keep. And especially as you get older and if you have success, it is absolutely critical, no matter how good you think you are at this stuff. And in the ins and outs of paying taxes and those things, I'm pretty well versed at. The tax code changes year to year. My CPA goes to conferences all the time that I'm paying for, I'm sure, to learn about just what changed year to year and how to structure if you have multiple properties, is it better to put them in an LLC, or do how do you own those things? How do you move them from your name to an entity, and how do you deal with all the quit claims and all those sorts of all those sorts of complicated things? Because the worst thing you could do is, if you don't ever straighten it out for yourself, you could leave it as one hell of a mess for your heirs when you get into tax bills that they're not going to be prepared to pay, and end up having to liquidate everything that you worked for your whole life. So
I think that we're busy in the business, that it's, as entrepreneurs, that sometimes it's hard to recognize the help or the advice that you need outside. And there's a reason that people in my business don't handle their own money, or doctors operate on their family members, or lawyers representing themselves. It's hard to get through to see when you're deep in it, and to have that outside expertise to give you the outside, bigger, broader view.
That's really good advice, because I think we all get to a place where I know this, I know how to do this, I'll just do it, and it's just easier sometimes, right? Or boy, it's hard to go sit down and make an appointment to sit down for 2 hours to go do my taxes, or I've gotten to a place where I won't accept my CPA sending me a 20-page booklet and saying, this is what we did last year, so how do you want to, what changed, what didn't change? We need to sit down and talk about it. Does it cost more? Yes, it costs a lot of money to sit down and do that, but it gets very complicated very fast. And I joke, we pay for our taxes by the inch. We got stacked.
That's right. That's right.
And if it's not, you're not doing it right. That's what I've come to learn, because there's a lot of schedules, as it turns out. So you got
money well spent.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about some things that you're passionate about. You're passionate about hiring good people and getting out of the way. Those are two other common themes that I hear about. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
I thought you were going to say money. Yes, of course I'm passionate about money. I was leaning in, and then you said managing.
Given, Kim, right?
That's right. Yeah, I have made a lot of mistakes as it relates to hiring competent, talented, qualified people. And through those errors, I got better and better. And it really started with working on myself first, in terms of understanding what are my strengths and where do I need to develop, and what do I not care about developing but hire out. And so the team that I have had around me for quite a while, they're all under age 35.
And yeah.
They're brilliant. Originally it was 30, but now I have to say 35.
Susanna likes to hear that, because she's not very far over 35. So she smiles. Those are her peers.
For good reason. I think that every industry is being disrupted today. And if we don't understand what that means in terms of my industry, finance, or someone else's industry, and then the interconnectedness of these other industries blending together, that someone that's under 35 has a completely different out-of-the-box thought around it. And also with technology and other things. So what I discovered is that when I step back and allow them to have a chance to brainstorm and share their opinions around things, that we end up with much better outcomes. And so that I can share, when I think of where I come from, I really feel like I created Wealth Legacy Institute that was very mission driven as it relates to creating a firm with humanity, a firm filled with soul for the client to really meet their needs. So if I keep the vision and allow them to think of how to do it differently than 2 decades ago, even a decade from now, think of the conversation around money and how different it will be. So my jam is to really allow others around me to come up with things that I don't see, because I only have my own lens on, and my lens is from this historical perspective, and I could see roadblocks, and minefields that they may not see. But the idea of exploring what's possible, I think, is really a wonderful place to be as a leader.
Well, when you look at I see this in the cybersecurity business a lot. When you look at the way that the younger crowd they've grown up immersed in technology. My kids are 18 and 16 and they have some textbooks, but the vast majority of what they do is on a computer. They've grown up in I want to say since 7th grade, that they've had a machine assigned to them, and they get one in junior high, and then they get another one in high school, and they're responsible for it, and everything they have is on that machine. And the amount, the things that they understand about efficiency, it was mind blowing. Our daughter, we had built a home, and we were, taking notes and pictures, and you would not believe what she was able to do using her phone and OneDrive to organize just massive amounts of information to allow my wife to effectively do all the ordering that she needed to do to get all those things done. And we brought her along as an afterthought, honestly, and she ended up being the savior of the whole trip. So it is amazing the perspective that they bring when they've been immersed in it. Think about phones that probably, I think in our area here, I don't think it's a great habit. The kids on phones at 2 or 3 years old, and they know how to use them. They can figure it out. They're built for them. In fact, the phones are built for my understanding is Apple builds for something like that of a 6-year-old on the interface. So,
do you know, it reminds me of a trip that my family took about 6 years ago to Florida. And we were like, let's charter a yacht for the day. And, in my head, I'm thinking cost, and all of a sudden my daughter's like, I got it. There's this here. We have 3 choices. Which one do you want? And we had it booked for the very next day because she had it right there.
Yeah.
Where I would have taken how many more steps to decide or talk myself out of it in the activity. And it was so wonderful to not have all that empty space in between to get distracted.
What I love is that the next stage of that is then you start looking at the reviews and you're making decisions.
That's right.
As one of my former salespeople said, she said, if that asshole said something to me in real life, I would look at him and say, get the hell out of here. I don't care about your damn opinion. But here I am making decisions about major purchases in my life based on some stranger's thoughts that I wouldn't give the time of day. Pardon my French. That was her exact phrase and how she said it. And it struck me. It's totally true. I tell my wife all the time. I'm like, you can read those till the cows come home. But if you want to do it and it looks good to you, call the operator maybe. But, getting somebody's opinion who has nothing in common with you, it's amazing how much power that has over our lives.
Social credibility. I think of how much easier it is to feel better about renting that Airbnb.
Yeah.
Would you otherwise spend all this money for a month-long Airbnb that you've never been to or seen? Social credibility in those reviews.
It's absolutely crazy. I have a small condo that we rent out in the high season, and we use Airbnb to manage it, which is amazingly easy. I mean, but we're incredibly selective in how we rent it, and we have return guests every year. So there's only 1 or 2 users a year. It's amazing how powerful those reviews are. Until we had a review, you don't get traffic. Once you have a couple of good ones and people start to understand that it's not that you're just selective in how you do it, those 1 or 2 reviews get unbelievable amounts of traffic because people are looking for somebody to just say it was okay.
That it even exists.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, probably relevance in the algorithms and all those other things that happen, but the power of those. And if you look at for sure anybody under 30 and how they're influenced, the social experiment and the social credibility as you speak to, I feel sorry for them because I work with kids from the local high school, which actually makes me feel sorry for my kids. Don't tell them that. But whether you look, however you look at the social media and the social credibility aspect of it, the amount of pressure it has placed on those kids, not even academically or any of that stuff. They no longer need our approval. They need the approval of their peers constantly. They grow up with a very different mindset, and you have to start to figure out how to adapt to that at work. So it's a good point.
Well, and when you think of social proof, it's both ways. Not only the owner of the Airbnb, but the guest is also getting evaluated.
Oh, yeah.
So you think of our future in our footprint of trust and credibility based on these evaluations of how that will impact the entrepreneurs of today starting out. To not pay attention to the social media footprint is a huge mistake.
Huge, and it's getting more important and scarier too, honestly. And that is one of the things when I show teens in this incubator setting. It's about building businesses and stuff. And Susanna's been awesome and volunteered to help different teams over the years. But when you show them how easy it is to market using social media, and you show them the criteria and how you can slice and dice things and get down to very small groups of targeted people in a geographic area and stuff like that, it's the first time I generally see the light bulb going off with them about what they're doing. And every one of those interactions with that platform is tracked. And I always tell them, if it's free, you are the product.
That's right. That's right. Well,
they don't get
it. They don't quite get it yet. But if you think about as entrepreneurs, I mean, we never should take our eyes off of client love, customer love, client love. I mean, that's really the core, and everything we're talking about is how to perpetuate that or make it better based on the experience. And so I would think, kind of when I think of my team and where we focus, it's really focused on how to make the experience better. And you never arrive. There's never arrival. It's always better never stops. And I think that's important to understand as any business leader should. Well, every entrepreneur understands that. It's the team. Does the team understand that better never stops, and to always push for the better?
That's a very interesting. I think about the experience that I've had with my people that do what you do for me, and it is a challenging experience because you're like being passed off to, well, this guy's going to do this and this one's going to do that, and it's outside the realm of your domain expertise. A lot of times it's very deeply personal because now you're talking about, first you're facing your own mortality, right? As part of it. And then you're trying to make decisions about what's best for your family and, protecting your assets and setting them up for success, which, fortunately for my parents, a problem they never had.
With pensions. That's right.
Totally different world, right? Yeah. Where, in fact, my father was a police officer, still alive, but has a pension. Now, in the state of Illinois, it's always about whether or not they'll ultimately be able to collect on it and for how long, because we've got issues with those. But it's a very challenging, very personal experience, and if it's not handled well, it gets awkward pretty fast. As you get passed around from person to person, it's good to have a Sherpa you can trust. So the one question that we ask everybody, and really this is about helping others as they're getting started. We ask every entrepreneur, what advice would you give in your case 15-year ago self as you were getting started on your own and I'm going to go it alone? When you look back on what you know now, what advice would you give that younger version of yourself starting out?
Probably two things. And they kind of segue together a little bit. I would say that to be unafraid of challenging the status quo. Because as we talked about earlier in the segment of disruption in every single industry with technology and the integration of technology with humanity and how to balance the human side of our business with the tech side of our, and we kind of hit on that on both sides of that coin and as we had this discussion. So not being afraid of challenging the status quo, I think that's you always need to be challenging the status quo because that's where we are. And if you're not asking the right questions. The segue to that on the second piece of that is, for me personally, is really the ability to embrace fear. And fear is that next course correction because there's a lot of missteps. There's a lot of really stupid shit that you do.
If you're not breaking it, you're not doing it right.
Right. That you think is this brilliant idea. And that all of those lead you to your next best. And I think to understand that it's a stair step of course corrections along the way with a lot of failures in between, but to move forward, not be afraid, not try to create something and think it's perfect before you present it to the world, is to just do it and then course correct. So to get it to market sooner, practice that for me on a client, see how they respond to that. Just hearing what you said in terms of the interaction of sometimes you get passed around with the area of expertise, because in the nature of our work, there's no one person that is better than the rest of the team in terms of how we show up. Everyone has a role and a place, but from your perspective, that emotional piece that you just shared is really important to understand that that's what that client is feeling.
Yeah, it's very hard. I learned that it's something I used to preach a lot, something that reminding myself I got away from. The analogy I give is when I was a police officer early in my younger days, and one of the guys in the academy said, you have to understand, well, if you're out and you're just working radar, doing traffic stops, whatever, if you're stopping, the average Joe or average Susie, it's a traumatic event for them. It's something that doesn't happen very often. They're nervous, so they're going to act funny. And for you, it's your job. So you're doing it 8 times a day, 10 times a day, 20 times a day, whatever, right? So it's routine. And when you're kind of going through your routine and they're acting weird, your tendency is to get your guard up, right? And like, why is this person freaking out or whatever? It's not until you sort of understand. Now, you should always have your guard up in that line of work to some degree or another. When you let your guard down, it has catastrophic, often permanent results. But you have to put yourself in their shoes and understand that. And, that goes to sort of some advice my dad gave me, which was always try to get them to say thank you when it was over and all those pieces. But I've carried that forward in technology quite a bit because I tell people in our service team, when we show up, something's broken already. They've been without the internet for 2-3 hours, sometimes days. Sometimes our partner's been trying to troubleshoot this and held on to it too long. And, if you're without the internet and you're an entrepreneur and you're losing money and you show up at the business, it doesn't matter if it's 2 minutes or 2 days or anywhere in between. They're pissed. Like, they have no email. They're not communicating. They might not have phone service now, right? Because the old phone lines as a backup doesn't work. So they're working off their cell phone, and thank God they have that. But they're pissed. So yes, they're going to be short. Yes, they're going to be ornery about it. But turn that opportunity around and get them to say thank you and put yourself in their shoes, because this is a traumatic experience for them that doesn't happen all the time. When I deal with I deal once a quarter with my guy, right? But when I need to do something different and he starts saying, blah, 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 I bought a bow yesterday. It was the worst experience I ever had. I hadn't shot a bow in 20 years. I might as well have been a complete neophyte. And they're like, well, this. I'm like, I'm confused. I finally said, I am confused. I do not understand what you're saying. So put one here and one here and tell me how much I'm paying for these 2 devices. And then let's talk about the accessories. And until I broke it down to the guy, I said, this is how if you want to make a sale, this is not an insignificant amount of money. It was a lot of money, in fact. Break it down. Until I said that, he was unable to communicate with me because he took for granted that I understood everything he did. Those sort of experiences suck.
Good advice to our entrepreneurs, because we're doing it every day and we forget.
It's easy to forget. We talk, especially in our business, we talk in acronyms all the time. I see people, like
You're talking to the acronym business as well.
it's terrible. Like it is absolutely. I actually find myself doing it to my team when it gets into finance stuff that probably only I understand and I don't realize. And Suzanne is getting a hell of an education lately as we get into working with.
Yesterday, the IR team used an acronym, and
You just did it, by the way, and I was about to do it. I was about to say IR, right? To a lot of people, that doesn't mean anything. By the way, it could mean incident response, right? In our cyber business, IR means one thing. To our public company audience, IR means a totally different thing, right? And I was watching those guys say things and do things, and watching other people's heads spin, and realize that they lost half the crowd real quick. And these are professional, very, very good guys, and awesome to work with. But Susanna, remind me later for next time we talk one-on-one. I actually have a bunch of feedback for you and for them about how to break this down and make things even better, right? So it is something that we have to always be cognizant of. So I caution everybody to not think everybody knows what you're talking about, especially when you're an entrepreneur. We tend to think everybody understands what we're thinking, not just saying. So, cool.
And as entrepreneurs, there's no reserve team. It's you.
So,
and people there, everyone's there for a reason.
So as we close, how can people find out more about you, get in touch with you? I appreciate your time, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to kind of plug your business a little bit and what you do, and how can I find you?
Yes, wealthlegacyinstitute.com.
We'll make sure to get your bio, your URL, even some of the books that you've authored. We'll make sure to get that on our podcast landing page. So anybody listening right now, check out Kim and all of her achievements, and where you can find her on our podcast page. So thank you so much, Kim. It's great getting to know you, learning from you. And thank you to our listeners for joining us today. If you have questions for Kim, for Mark, or for myself, please email us at podcast@highwirenetworks.com. Until next time, I'm Susanna Song.
And I'm Mark Porter.
And this is The Working CEO.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of The Working CEO. Also, don't forget to rate this show, share the episodes you like, and leave us a comment. Remember, whether your collar is blue or white, roll up your sleeves and get real. The Working CEO is made possible by Highwire Networks, a leading global provider of managed and professional services and managed cybersecurity services. We serve businesses in more than 180 countries. To learn more, visit highwirenetworks.com.